When I started in 3D printing, I started to make things to sell on the internet for money. Because I, like many people, can't get into a hobby unless there's some kind of profit potential behind it. Is that a middle-aged thing? Vote now on your phones. So I've been daily, semi-daily chronicling my process through 3D printers, learning about 3D printers, printing products, and selling them on the internet. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel and follow along in that process, do so now. I often ask people for suggestions on what to print, and some kind soul came through and suggested I print a Dummy 13, like this one here. It's a little action figure model. It moves and articulates. You print all the parts very easily on a printer. This one's scaled up to 300%. The original model is considerably smaller, and on my channel I have great big printers, so I tend to print really big things. So I started looking around on Etsy, and I saw that a 27-inch version of this Dummy 13 was selling for $90. There are other versions on Etsy as well at various sizes at various different prices, but I saw the profit potential and I thought, this thing sells. I have big printers. You thinking what I'm thinking? And so, of course, I printed a life-size Dummy 13 just like this one. So I'm going to take you through the process of what it took to print this 1300% scale Dummy 13 model and why I think this is probably the worst 3D print I've ever done. Oh God, stupid. So link in the description below over to this Dummy 13 model. I downloaded it off Printables, and this is the test model that I printed in 300% of size. So the Dummy 13 model is broken up into two main sections: the skeleton, the frame, and these armor pieces that you see in blue and white here on the outside. It's recommended to print the skeleton in something more robust than PLA, so PETG or ABS or something like that. I printed all mine in PETG. And so when you go to scale this model up, one of the common criticisms that you see is that it does not scale well. So when people start scaling it over, say, 500%, you start to run into some severe problems. And that's mainly the joints. So on this 300% size, you can pop the joints in and out with some ease. And when you do that, they will stay where you put them. So you can articulate the doll in various different ways and it will stay how you put it. That is not the case when you go larger. You might be asking, do I need an Elegoo Orange Storm Giga like I see that you have in order to print one life size? You actually don't. It could all be fit onto my Cobra 2 Maxes. I used my Orange Storm Giga to print some of these in a big batch just to kind of speed up the process, but everything could fit on a Cobra 2 Max, which is a 420 by 420 build plate. I'm sure that if you wanted to break the pieces up and fit it onto something smaller like a bamboo printer, you could certainly do that. The largest piece in the print is the shin bone, and so if you download that, put it into your slicer, scale it up, and then you can kind of see whether or not you're going to be able to fit everything else. So I printed all these parts on all my printers: the A1, the P1P, the Flashforge 85M Pro, the FL Sun T1 Pro, the Anycubic Cobra 2 Maxes, the Soval SV08, and of course the Elegoo Orange Storm Giga. Now the armor pieces on the outside, those are pretty easy. Those just slip onto the skeleton, but the skeleton is where most of the problems lie. Check comments on the Dummy 13 model on Printables. You'll see that there are lots and lots of remixes for people that want to scale up over 500%. I used this, the Big Mod over 500, for some of the joints where I thought I could encounter problems just based on what other people were saying. Ultimately, it didn't matter because I think that the Big Mod is for 500 to say 800. I really think anything over 900 or 1,000 is where you're just kind of going into uncharted territory and you're gonna have to come up with the solutions on your own. And I think quite simply it's just because there's more material. Here on this small version, you only have this small amount of material that needs to make it into here. This needs to flex sufficiently to allow this in, but once it's in, it snaps back into place. So take for example this knee joint. This is off my 300%. It's about this big. When you scale up to 1300%, it gets considerably larger. And that's more material that needs to move out of the way in order for it to snap into place. That amount of material, it's gonna crack. So on many of these joints, I had to reprint them after they cracked. I tried different numbers of wall loops, different styles of infill, different amounts of infill. Ultimately, it was my friend over at Tenmile Creations, Roger. I sent him this file over and he was able to stamp out something that actually worked. Originally, I'd asked him to cut this in half and then make a screw hole that I can just send a screw in. That way I can put it in place, put the other piece in, and screw it together without having to stress it and open it up to snap it onto the knee joint. But Roger came back with quite simply this, and it works out very well. Just removing this section here, it's enough to keep it and hold it in place and keep tension on it without having to stretch the whole thing in order to make it snap in. However, there were lots of other parts where the ball joints going into the cups, well, there's really no other way around that unless you scale the model. But you'd have to split the model, scale the cup, recombine it, reprint it, and I had already printed the entire skeleton in PETG. Additionally, many people commenting saying that you just need to heat up the joints before you snap them into place. But again, many of these comments coming from people that scaled the model to 500 to 1,000%. I'm at 1,300, considerably larger. So scaling, not so much. Heat gun, which is another common suggestion, also not so much. And I think it's just quite honestly too much material. Furthermore, when you start snapping the model together and there are PLA components on it, you don't really want to be pointing a heat gun too closely at those, and so you can never really warm it up too much. Eventually I started using a combination of heat gun plus grease, that's right, grease, to try to pop these into place, and I had some success. Ultimately, the one thing that worked over everything else was quite simply cutting pieces off of the cup enough to where the ball could snap in. I think unfortunately that makes it to where an amount of tension is not exerted on the different joints, or maybe the model's just quite simply too heavy to overcome that friction, and it overcomes the friction, and so the model can't really stand up on his own. Now I've considered in the midsection of gluing it into place so his abdomen does not articulate and he remains erect and upright, and that might give some more stability because his legs seem pretty stable. It's just that middle section that flops around, throws off the center of gravity, and he falls right over. So in the end, it was a combination of cutting pieces off, using my soldering iron with the flap thing, melting pieces away, greasing it up, heating it up, and then exerting and pushing with a lot of force on these PETG components to finally snap it in. And this is the end result. Let's put them on the operating table. All right, and so from bow to stern, I guess you could probably figure this out in a slicer as well, we are at 70 inches tall, which I think certainly counts as life size. I was also able to use HueForge to take my logo that I have plastered everywhere all over my channel, generate a copy there, print that out to put here on his chest. It's not an Iron Man thing. I don't even like Iron Man, but I thought it was cool. Instead of a 13, why not just put my logo there? So how much did it cost to print this life-size dummy 13? It was just over 8 spools of PETG for the skeleton and almost 12 spools of PLA for the armor components, all at various different wall thicknesses and infills, kind of dialing it in to kind of get close to 1 spool's worth on various printers. And for the armor components, they're not as robust as the skeleton components are, but all said 20 spools of filament, which comes out to about $250 to $275. I used Elegoo Rapid PETG and Elegoo Rapid PLA Plus for almost everything in this build. So what are my plans with this? Well, I printed it with the hopes of selling it on the internet, and I've got $250 to $275 in this thing. The amount of frustration though, the amount of time, the amount of labor, and the amount of just hate that I have for this thing now, I'd probably have to charge $87,000 to make it worth my while. Furthermore, I don't know that I could put this in a box and get under the oversized shipping charges, so that would cost at least $300 just to ship this thing. I'm not sure who's gonna be in the market for a life-size dummy 13. Maybe worth throwing it on the Etsy for $1,500, $2,000, see if I get any bites. But otherwise, I think I'll put it in my retail stores. Might be a nice decoration, nice sort of thing. I'd have to certainly affix it to the wall because he is gonna fall over if anyone nudges him. So maybe a bracket into the wall, kind of stiffen him up a little bit, leave his arms and legs to be articulated or something like that. But otherwise, it's a great interest piece, and if nothing else, a great interest piece for here on the channel. So that's my saga with the life-size dummy 13. Let me know what the next big print you want to see is and what you would do with this thing. And if you would have done anything different, have you printed a life-size dummy 13 and what did you do to get those joints together? Because I'm all ears. I don't know that I'm going to do this again, but in the future, maybe you could comment below if someone else wants to take a stab at it. Your insight might be really valuable to them. Be sure to like the video because it's a nice thing to do and subscribe for more content like this. I'm The Technicals. See you next time.